Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Blueprint for Profitable Growth by Business Beyond the Shoebox by Lona Whitaker. I'm your host, Irene Cho. Today's topic covered hiring help to grow your business, employees and independent contractors, compliance guideline, and best practice for getting the help you need to grow your business. This webinar is brought you in EWDD, BusinessSource Pico-Union Westlake region operated by PACE Business Development Center. This webinar will be recorded and you may find it on our website e-library after a week or two. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. Please mute yourself during the webinar. Uh, if you have a question, use the chat box and then write your question. Lona will check time to time or at the end of the webinar and then answer. Okay, we have a lot of things to cover, so we're gonna start right away. Please welcome Lona Whitaker.
Good morning, everyone. I'm so glad to see. I see some familiar names in the chat, so it's very nice to see some of you folks returning for these. So today's topic is going to be on hiring help. It's about what you need to know regarding 1099 contractors and employees. And I really do mean this. If you're playing small, you're playing the wrong game. Okay, because growth is going to be something you should be doing. Ultimately, you don't want to be spending 60 and 80 hours a week in working in your business. So getting the right kind of help is an important piece for growing your business. So we're going to talk about what that might look like for you and some of the considerations that you have regarding that. Okay. So I've dropped a little free gift for you in the chat box if you're interested. Let's get going. So I have to give you a disclaimer. I'm a small business consultant. I'm a financial strategist and a skills trainer. I'm an educator. I'm not an attorney, a CPA or licensed tax professional. I cannot and do not give legal and tax advice. However, legal and tax conversations come up all the time for business owners. Always check with a professional when you have a legal question or a tax question. However, there's lots of good information available to you on the internet. However, I remind you that I don't give legal or tax advice, but I am an educator and I can talk to you about what these areas are and what you should know about them. Be gentle with yourself. None of us was born knowing this stuff. My purpose is to share the proven techniques and strategies and skills necessary for having a profitable, well-run business. I have been told over and over that I have an extraordinary gift for simplifying complex financial concepts into actionable skills. Information is pointless if you don't put it to work. Okay, it's all in the implementation, folks. I tripled my business income my second year in business. Really just showed up my first year thinking, oh, I'll just show up, I'll do my work, I'll get my name out there. And I went, not so much. And then I said, okay, how can I do better? And we're going to ask ourselves this question all the time throughout the entirety of our business. How can I do better? What needs to be done? Okay, so I figured it out, tripled my income my second year in business, and I have been teaching my clients how to do that for themselves over and over. It might not be a triple, but I did have a client that had produced 40% growth in 9 months. That was her request. We walked through the steps. We got it done. My clients learn how to go beyond the boundaries of what's known to achieve what's possible. And I've had multiple clients who have gone from being employees, that startup phase, to having their own successful businesses. And I have several that are now in their, been in business more than 15 years. That's big. That's huge. A lot of businesses fail before they're 5 years old. I've had 2 clients go from being local startups to international contenders. And I have led more than 600 in-person and online workshops since 2008. And I have trained more than 1,500 entrepreneurs. I tell you these things about me so that you know that I have the credentials and I know what I'm talking about. Okay, so there's lots of information out there. Some of it's good, some of it's bad, some of it's useful, some of it's not. Get your learning, refine it so that it meets your business needs, and always keep learning, because the information can change, because laws can change. Financial savvy is learned, and savvy entrepreneurs make more money. Nothing simpler than that, folks. It takes more than ambition and hard work for us to achieve our goals. It's not about working harder. It's about knowing what to fix and how to fix it. All futures are created. Traditional systems and structures and financial skills are only 50% of the success equation. It is our beliefs about money and success that run everything. And for the past 3 decades, I have been curating the very best, most effective strategies, insights, and tools that are essential for making and having money. And it is a privilege for me to share them with you. Genuinely, it is my privilege to be with you here today. Now, as we get started, you may be tempted to try to snap pictures of the slides. Don't worry about it. You're going to get a copy of the slide deck. Okay? Please take your notes. Primarily, listen. Listen to some of these things that I will be sharing with you today, because you'll get a copy of the recording. It'll be made available to you, and you'll get a copy of the slide deck, which will help you refine this for yourself. Listen for where you're at now and what action items and next steps might be best for you. Success is not an event, it's a result. Okay. And the other point that I really want to make here is no plan survives contact with the enemy. As soon as you decide what you're going to do and what your next steps are, things are going to begin to happen. Chaos can ensue. The thing is that it's not your fault. Okay? It's just kind of the way things operate. So be gentle with yourself, back up, regroup, set a new plan, get back at it. Okay, so today what we're going to cover is we're going to cover contractor or employee, a big distinction, by the way, hiring a contractor, hiring an employee, and some payroll best practices. Contractor or employee. In 2019, California passed Assembly Bill 5. It's called AB 5. Okay, and it was to extend the employee classification status to some gig workers. Okay, it was designed to regulate companies such as Uber, Lyft, and DoorDash. However, it did so much more. The link is here if you would like to look at it, but I'm going to cover the basics for you. Assembly Bill 5 creates the presumption that a worker who performs services for a hirer, that would be you, your business, is an employee unless the hirer, you, can demonstrate that they are not. It puts all the burden of proof on you to prove that they are not an employee. You must establish that the worker is an independent contractor and not an employee. So how do we pass the ABC test? And I'm going to show you what the ABC test is. And this is really important, and it can vary by industry, and there are still some nuances that are being worked out. However, be very, very careful, because if you think that you can get around the rule and you can hire someone as a contractor when in fact they're deemed an employee, what's going to happen, okay, is that at some point in the future, that person may go to the EDD, the Employment Development Department, and say, oh, I'm no longer working for this person. Where's my unemployment? And the EDD goes, well, you were never reported as an employee. And they go, well, I was. And they get all upset. And then the EDD looks at it and they go, oh, guess what? You're right. You were an employee. And then they fine the employer and the business owner. And then, okay, they may look at every other independent contractor you have to see if you violated the rules there. And there can be some significant hefty fines. Okay, so we don't want to break the ABC rule. And there are some really good reasons to hire employees, even though there are some cost considerations there. So a person providing labor or services for remuneration shall be considered an employee rather than an independent contractor unless the hiring entity, you, the small business owner, demonstrates that all of the following conditions are satisfied. Here we go. The person is free from the control and direction of the hiring entity in connection with the performance of the work, both under the contract for the performance of the work and in fact. Okay, that means, well, sure, I hired him as an independent contractor, and then I started telling him exactly how they were going to do the work they were going to do for me. An independent contractor should theoretically have their own tools. Expertise and knowledge is considered a tool. Okay, and they should be the ones determining how they're going to perform the work. The quality of the work is where kind of that nuance is. You can say, well, this is what I need and when I need it, kind of a thing. However, they're going to actually be the person that determines how it gets performed and how they deliver what you're asking for. Okay. B, the person performs the work that is outside the usual course of the hiring entity's business. So a couple of examples that I can give you would be the person who has a landscaping business, but a big component of their landscaping business is the what I call the mow and blow, the mowing the lawns and blowing the leaves and doing some yard cleanup and that sort of thing. Okay, anyone that they hire to do that work is going to be an employee. Okay, now myself as an individual, I can hire a gardener, and for me the gardener is an independent contractor because one, I'm not in business to hire a gardener, and it is for my personal home, so I can hire a gardener and they can be an independent contractor to me. However, if my business was a landscaping and gardening business, I would not be able to hire a gardener to work for my business and have them as an independent contractor. They would, in fact, have to be treated and paid for as an employee. There's lots of other examples that you can think of. So another one that's a really good example is that, let's say, okay, I can do my own bookkeeping. However, I'm a business consultant. I can hire a bookkeeper to do my bookkeeping for me and pay them as an independent contractor. And this is a really common thing for business owners, whether it's a landscaping company or a beauty salon or a business consulting. They can hire a bookkeeper to do their bookkeeping, and that can be an independent contractor. However, if I happen to be an accountant and I do bookkeeping as part of my services, then that bookkeeper that I hire has to be hired as an employee. So that's kind of that measure. Is this person performing work that is outside the usual course of my business? If it is, they can be hired as an independent contractor. Marketing, bookkeeping, so very common ones. However, if my business is marketing and it is accounting, then they would have to be hired as an employee. There's a big distinction right here. This is probably the biggest part that gets argued. C is the person is customarily engaged in an independently established trade, occupation, or business of the same nature that is involved in the work performed. Again, hiring a marketing person, hiring a bookkeeper, okay? Hiring a gardener. Let's say you own a building and that's part of your business and you hire a gardener. They can be an independent contractor. So they're already established as a trade or occupation or business that is of the type that the work performed. So I hope that gives you some clarity. This is that really big piece when it comes to independent contractors. Hiring a contractor. The determination of an employee or independent contractor relationship is determined by the existence of the following criteria. The contract with the business service provider is in writing. Yes, it can be by an email, okay, but the nature of your relationship should be in writing. The provider has a business license or business tax ID if required. So sure, they may be using their social security number. That's fine. They may or may not have a business license. Many do. Some of them can have state issued certifications. Okay. So do they have that? So if it's required, they have those things. Okay. The provider has their own office. A home office counts. that is separate from the business or work location of the contracting business. That would be you. They don't have their office in your office. That can blur the line and create some issues, okay? So do they have their own office, okay? And the provider is customarily engaged in an independently established business of the same nature as that involved in the work performed. Basically, they have their own business, okay? They're either doing it under a fictitious business name, or they're have an LLC or a corporation, and they're going to be working for other people, okay? They are actually in business. If they're not in business, be very careful, because they may in fact be that kind of person that would say, oh, no, I was an employee, I'm due unemployment. So they need to be in business and have other customers, okay? The provider actually contracts with other businesses to provide the same or similar services and maintains a clientele without restrictions from the hiring entity. That means you can't tell them who they can work for, okay? They advertise and hold themselves out to the public as available to provide the same or similar services. The provider provides their own tools, vehicles, and equipment to perform the services. Yes, again, knowledge and expertise are tools. The provider can negotiate its own rates. Negotiate is the key here. You cannot tell them what you're going to pay them, okay? Because like an employee, you would say, oh, I'm going to pay you this much per hour. No, the provider will tell you how much their rate is per hour. Now, you can either agree to pay it or not pay it, or you can ask them if you can get a better price. However, you may not dictate to them what you're going to pay them per hour. Okay, that steps over the line and can create the employee relationship as opposed to an independent contractor relationship. The provider can set its own hours and location of work. Okay, here again, they can set their own hours and where they're going to do the work. However, for example, if you own a building and it's a landscaper, okay, that comes in and provides gardening type services, well, the location of the work is going to be your building. Okay, that's fine. Okay, setting its own hours. Well, again, that's usually going to be daylight hours, and they may or may not come at that particular time. However, if you have a locked gate or locked access janitorial services, they have to have access to the building that they would clean. So they may not be able to say, well, I'm going to come at 1 o'clock in the morning. Well, that's when the alarm is set. We're shut down for the day. You can say, no, it'll have to be before 7 o'clock at night or something like that. You could work out the hours. Again, it's negotiated. But they may provide their services within parameters that are reasonable for you and your business. The provider is not performing a type of work which is licensed from the Contractor State Licensing Board, which is required pursuant to Chapter 9. Okay, so what this means is that licensed contractors, the CSLB, people who have their license there, okay, if they don't have an active license, okay, they must be hired as an employee. Okay, and it has gotten a lot of construction companies into trouble because they thought they were hiring someone with a license and they were functioning as an independent contractor, only to find out that their license had been revoked or expired. And they were, in fact, in an employee relationship, because that one requires that if they don't have this license, they're performing work for a construction company, they must be hired as an employee. Best practices. An independent contractor sets, negotiates their price and their hours, okay? An independent contractor is a business, always. They have business cards, they will invoice you for their services, has their own equipment, again, expertise counts, their own insurance, and other clients. Get their tax identification number and details. Give them a W-9 prior to making your first payment. You can get this form easily. It's from the IRS. Give it to them, have them fill it out, and get it back to you. Because an LLC that is a single member is taxed under their Social Security number. Usually, they can get an EIN. You need to have that information because 1099s are required at the end of the year. Corporations don't get them. There are other considerations. And what I have discovered is that if you don't do this on the front end, come January, when you have to do the 1099s, it can get really, really frenetic and hard. And some of these folks, they don't want you to give them a 1099 because then the IRS knows how much they're making and they can get difficult. So I get always at the front end. It's a requirement that you receive their payment. If they're going to pay them more than $600 or more, I know that in advance usually, and I require a W-9 before I issue their first payment. If your independent contractor has employees, have them provide you with proof of workers' compensation insurance. Now, this is important if they come onto your property, not so much if they're just working out of their own office, but yeah, if you've got them coming onto your property and they're coming on with their employees, then you want to be sure that they have workers' compensation insurance, okay, that they're treating all of their employees as employees and not trying to skirt around it because you could ultimately become liable for injuries and such. So that's a really big piece there. Have a written contract or document of your agreement in writing. Again, an email is fine, a written contract is fine. Okay. This is a professional arrangement. Don't treat them like an employee. Okay. And what I mean by that, I have found lots of contractors have complained that the people have hired them want to micromanage, then want to tell them what they're going to pay, tell them what their hours are going to be. Oh, you were supposed to be here at 9, you're late. Yeah, they're not employees. This is a professional arrangement. Okay, let's get on to hiring employees. Give me a sec here. Need some water. Okay, let's go. Hiring an employee. I'm going to say this again throughout this part of the presentation. Hiring employees, okay, requires a learning curve and information. And this is just the front end of this. It just gives you some basics. Doing the payroll requires a lot more compliance with governing entities. You'll need to know those things or you're going to need to hire a professional. I certainly encourage you to hire professional help when you're getting started hiring the employees so that you can get this right, because it causes a lot of headaches and can cost a lot of money, and there can be fines and penalties that you don't need to pay if you get it right from the beginning. So do this as the beginning of your learning curve. California is an at-will state. Most states are. This means that an employee is free to leave their job at any time. And they are not required to give you 2 weeks notice. They can walk in and say, oh, by the way, I'm not coming in today and I won't be back. Give me my check. So you have like 72 hours to do that. The thing is that that's an at-will state, but you're also an at-will employer, which means they can walk in and you can say, here's your final check. We're not going to keep you on. Okay. So you're free to fire an employee at any time for any lawful reason or even no reason at all. So you cannot fire an employee for an unlawful reason, i.e., race, gender, disability, sexual orientation, religion, political beliefs, or any form of retaliation. Now, this doesn't mean that you can not have these kinds of conversations going on on your business property. In fact, these kinds of conversations should not be going on your property. You just cannot fire them for this. However, you could do an at-will termination for misconduct because they were always wanting to talk about politics or religion or sexual orientations or genders or whatever. Okay, so but you can't fire them. Those are unlawful reasons to fire them for. Now, you're going to need to get some forms done. So one of the things you will do is you will apply for an employer's identification number. It's called an EIN, and you will get that from the IRS. Now, if you are already a corporation and have an EIN number, you don't need to get another one. Okay. However, if you're doing business under your Social Security, either as a single member LLC or as a sole proprietor, then and you don't have an EIN, you'll apply for it because that's how you start the process of reporting employee wages and things like that. So if you don't have one, you're going to need to get an EIN, and you'll get it. It's the form SS4. It's pretty simple to fill out. And one of the questions will be, do you currently have employees? If you do, and you're going to hire very soon, you mark yes. If you fill it out and you don't know when you're going to hire your employees, just mark no, because the yes triggers the IRS to start watching for your 941s. Okay, so as soon as your first 941 comes in, which is a form, compliance form, as soon as that comes in, then they will start tracking you as an employer. You're going to go to the EDD, the Employment Development Department for the state of California. Or if you're listening to this and you're from another state, you will have to go to your state in order to find out what your employer compliance documents are and jump through their hoops. So I've provided you with the link. The copy of the PDF should all have active links so that you can get these fairly easily. Okay. All right. So then you're going to get your EDD account, and then you're also going to need to register for a CalSavers account. CalSavers has made it really easy for you as an employer because you can assign a delegate who can handle making the payments and things like that for you, but you will have your own employer's account. This is not optional. Okay, it's no longer an optional thing. You have to get the account. All of your employees, when you hire a new employee, they will be put in, and then they have 30 days to opt out. Otherwise, you're going to start making deductions. Learning curve here, folks. It's not hard, but there is a learning curve. Okay, and some of the information on the internet is inaccurate. So go to the source, go to EDD, go to CalSavers. They're really great at CalSavers. They'll talk to you on the phone and they can answer your questions. Hire an experienced bookkeeper and get payroll software. Sure Payroll, QuickBooks, etc. Now, the payroll software allows your bookkeeper, particularly in the case of QuickBooks, okay, to do all the bookkeeping on your side of the equation. This means that you will be responsible for turning in all the compliance documents, making sure that the taxes that are withheld are paid. Okay, making sure that all the compliance forms to the IRS, which is the 941 and the 940, are done when they're due. So 941s are done quarterly, the 940 is done annually. These are things you'll have to learn. And I know this is a lot of numbers, a lot of alphabet soup here, a lot of information coming at you. Don't panic. It's just a step-by-step process. This gives you a fundamental outline of what you'll be looking for and how to get yourself started, because you're going to learn as you go. But I do believe that you should hire an experienced bookkeeper and get payroll software. Better yet, get a payroll service. Again, this is going to be ADP, QuickBooks, bookkeepers, CPAs, etc. Sure Payroll, and Gusto isn't here. GUSTO, that's a newer one that has done a really, really good job. And it'll help you with the scheduling, it'll help you with the timekeeping, it will help you with all of those things, and it'll help you prepare get your employees paid, and then they take all the money for the taxes and they send it off to the EDD or the IRS, Social Security, whoever needs to get it, and they do all the reports, and they do it all for you for a very nominal fee. It is worth it to have a payroll service. I cannot stress that enough for people who are not experienced with payroll. If you, as the owner and a corporation or an LLC taxed as a corporation, are the only employee, this is a great place for you to start learning, and you absolutely want a payroll service. Do not do this on your own. It becomes a huge headache, okay? So you need to get what's called a DE 1857A poster. It's issued by the EDD. You can get it from chambers of commerce. You can get it from Amazon. You can get it from services that provide these things. These posters explain an employee's rights to unemployment insurance, disability insurance, and paid family leave. It must be posted in a publicly accessible space to the employees where they feel safe to look at it. Okay. Any efforts to intimidate them from learning about their rights is a big no-no. Okay. So this poster needs to be put up, and it should be put up and replaced annually. Okay. The EDD and IRS have lots of resources and support, and there's lots of good information out there. However, I do encourage you to get help from someone experienced. Hiring an HR firm, at least in the beginning, is worth the cost. They can help you get your employee handbook. They can help you with all of these different things. And I don't remember if it's part of this. However, I'll mention it here. It's what I call practice over policy. Your employee's handbook and the things that you have in writing are going to be the policy that your company operates under. For example, you say, the law requires you to provide breaks and lunch breaks and that sort of thing. And so the policy is to honor all of that. If you start practicing something different, where you make breaks hard, or you don't allow the breaks, or you try to manage lunch breaks and things like that, you're creating a practice that overwrites policy. And if your employees get asked, well, do you get your breaks? And one says no, the EDD will be all over you to find out if you, in fact, are honoring the requirements of the law for breaks and lunch breaks and everything. So that's where timekeeping becomes kind of a critical piece for you. So stick with your policy. Be wary of creating practices because they're convenient that overwrite policy. Always live within your policy parameters. You're going to need to determine your pay schedule: weekly, bi-weekly, semi-monthly, and your related pay dates. Okay. Determine what benefits you will offer: vacation policy, sick time, holidays, etc., and which classification of employees will get them: full-time, part-time, that sort of thing. Put it in writing. You will not remember this. I guarantee you, you'll just kind of go, oh, and somebody will ask you, oh, well, I think we pay for this. No. Write it down. Know exactly which holidays, what the vacation policy is, what the sick time policy is. California and most states now have a very strict sick time policy. You have to know it. You have to adhere to it. You can give more sick time, but you cannot give less. Okay. And part-time employees are eligible for it as well, which didn't used to be the case. So you've got to check in and make sure that you understand the laws. And these are the things you're going to be looking at: vacation, sick, holidays, that sort of thing, and put it in writing. Here's a tip about bi-weekly payrolls. There are 26 bi-weekly payrolls in a year. This means there are several months with 3 payrolls in it. If you have a big payroll, you'd better plan for it. Had a client that was really struggling with it. Their payroll was normally about $50K. And what happened is that they kept hitting those months where they had to come up with an additional $50,000. So their payroll went from $100,000 a month to $150,000 a month several times a year. And that became really hard and nearly impossible for them to manage because they didn't plan for it. They weren't setting money aside each month to be sure that they had that extra $50,000 every those months when it occurred. So semi-monthly is a great way of creating a predictable payroll. Lots of people like the bi-weekly payroll. They're smaller payrolls. Just know that there are months with extra payrolls in them and be ready for them. Workers' compensation insurance. This is required of all employers with employees, not optional. Stay on top of it because sometimes it can get really high and you can actually negotiate better prices. But if you're a first-time employer, there's only going to be a few insurance companies that will actually cover you. So the first few years, you may be required to do some kind of a state-funded workers' compensation. But look around, ask around, see if you can find a good policy for yourself. And it's going to be based on the size of your payroll, how much you're paying, as well as the classification of your employees. So construction workers, very high premiums. Office workers, pretty low, okay? It provides basic benefits, including medical care, temporary disability benefits, permanent disability benefits, and death benefits for job-related injuries and death. Safety training is really important, folks, with your employees. Make sure that you don't end up with claims on workers' comp that could have been prevented. If someone is driving their own vehicle on your behalf for your business, they're covered by workers' comp. So if you're going to put someone out there in their car, be sure that they are a good driver, and be careful about sending employees on errands that maybe you should do. Okay. This coverage is not the same as your disability insurance, SDI, which is paid for by the employees as an payroll deduction. It's like, just over 1% of their wages. So this is not the same thing. This is workers' comp insurance. Most of you have heard about it. This is not new information. Just be sure that you're getting out in front of it and that it doesn't lapse. So let's talk a little bit about exempt versus non-exempt employees. You folks, a lot of you have heard this, but you may not have real good clarity about it. An exempt employee is a salaried employee. It means they're not being paid by the hour. They are paid a daily salary regardless of the number of hours worked in a given shift, with no deductions for partial absences. So if they're supposed to work a 40-hour week, but they work a 50-hour week, and then they take off half a day the following week for it, they don't get deducted for that. It's not sick time. It's not vacation time. It's just, they're kind of adjusting that because they're expected to be there. Even if the hours are from 8 to 5, they may show up at 7:30 to get the doors open and unlocked and the cash registers up and running, whatever it is. Then they may stay later and they're receiving a salary. So they're an exempt employee. Okay. They must be paid no less than 2 times the state's minimum wage based on a 40-hour week. So IAE, for example, if it's $14 an hour, a minimum wage, which I know that it's more than that right now, then that equals $58,240 annual salary. And then it's going to be divided by the number of pay periods. Okay. Yes, you can track their hours so that you know that they're not working too many hours, so that you understand, oh man, they're working consistently 60 hours or 70 hours a week. I'm going to have to address this because it's not going to be considered reasonable. Okay. Also, they must be performing exempt duties, that is, working primarily in intellectual, managerial, or creative, which requires exercise of discretion and independent judgment. So it came up recently for a company that I know, and that they have caregivers, and then they have an administrator. Now, occasionally their administrator can provide some caregiving kind of duties. If something comes up and a caregiver needs some help, she can step in and provide some assistance for that. However, the majority of her job must not be as a caregiver. She is the administrator, and she provides the scheduling and the oversight and the management for the caregivers. So they must be performing exempt duties the majority of their time. All right. And typically those duties require discretion and a lot of autonomy for them. So that is what an exempt employee is. You cannot take a caregiver, say that they're an exempt employee, pay them a little bit more, and then have them performing all the same duties. It won't fly. Okay. Non-exempt employees are hourly, which means they get paid overtime. They must have their lunch breaks. They must have their breaks. They must keep time clocks. Okay. Finding employees. So people always go, how do I go about finding an employee? Well, be clear about the hours, the working days, the duties, the skills. If it's a remote, the remote is an option, benefits. And remember, it's an employee market, and it still is. So what's in it for them? Okay. You want to hire the best you can hire. I'm going to request You pay the very top dollar you can manage because it gives you a chance to choose from the very best of the employees out there. You can place your ad in places where future employees are likely to see it. LinkedIn, Indeed, social media. I mean, there's lots of options out there. If you were looking for a job, where would you look? Okay. Places like Craigslist, and I don't even know how active it is anymore. A lot of scams going on there. A lot of employees no longer look at Craigslist. Check with your friends. Check with your local EDD office. They've got people that are looking for jobs. It's required that they be applying for jobs. Check with them, see if they've got any employees they could refer. Colleges or employment agencies. There's lots of different places for you to look. So carve out some time, get that information out there, and be really clear about what's in it for them. Why do they want to come work for you? Because that's how you're going to attract the very best of employees. This is my own personal observation about hiring employees. Hire what you cannot train. I can train just about anything, but I cannot train dependability. I cannot train demeanor, okay? Integrity, agreeability, intellect, the ability to follow directions. Oh my goodness, what a big piece that is. So hire what you can't train. And people will go, well, how would I even figure that out? Well, in your interview, you can kind of ask them some questions. But I love, giving them a handwritten employment application that says if you turned in a CV or some other paperwork, you don't need to fill in this piece. Look to see if they actually read the thing. Okay. Now, sure, they may feel uncertain and feel compelled to fill it out. You just want to see if they can follow directions. Okay. Verbal or written. So, and then, did they show up on time? Ask them some questions about their integrity. If the situation presented itself, how would you act? Kind of a thing. Open-ended questions. So employment applications, so keep them simple and relevant for you. There are lots of options available online. I like to rank candidates on a scale of 1 to 5. It really helps me to see that, how I'm going to choose them. It makes it more objective and less subjective. So I very seldom see a 5, but every now and again, I'll see someone that's really 5 on the scale. I mark them, 5 stars, number 5 at the top of my interview slip on them. And 1, if they're a 1 or a 2, I usually throw them out. I don't usually interview them any further. So they have to be 3 to 5s before I actually say these are the candidates that I'm going to look at. Trust your gut. You're picking up vibes about integrity and demeanor and, all of those things. Trust your gut on that. You do need to keep all of the applications for at least 1 year. If someone were to claim that you were discriminating, okay, you would want those as a backup. You can keep them electronically. You don't have to keep them as paper. Do your initial interview over the phone, 15 minutes. Again, rank them 1 to 5. Then do a face-to-face interview with the very best candidates. Ask open-ended questions. Hire your choice quickly. Good employees are in high demand and they go fast. And again, pay well. Be sure to create an onboarding checklist. You don't want to have to keep this all in your head. List all the forms you need completed. Make sure you have their personal and emergency contact information. This seems to be a big missing for people. Oh, you don't have their address? How did that happen? Okay. What do you mean you don't know who to contact in case of emergency? When you need that information, you need it now. So get it up front. So here's kind of a list of your state forms. The DE-34, report of new employee, employer sends this to the EDD. The DE-4, the California payroll tax, the employee fills that out. That's their payroll tax thing. The DLSE and TE, give me a break, alphabet soup, or equivalent. It's the notice to employee. It's completed by the employer and given to the employee and in compliance with the Wage and Theft Prevention Act. Employers were stealing so much and so frequently from their employees, promising them a certain wage and then paying them less after they were hired, that now you're required to give this to your employee so that they cannot make a claim that you promised them something that you didn't give to them. An information sheet about domestic abuse titled The Rights of Victims or Domestic Violence, Sexual Assault, and Stalking. So there's some forms that you're to provide as the owner. Just have your little state form packet all pulled together. This is where hiring an HR firm can be helpful. Federal forms. Okay. Federal forms are the employers and employees, citizens and non-citizens must complete an employment eligibility verification form, and then both of you will be participating in completing this. The employee must show employer their identity and eligibility to work documents. The employer must examine the employment eligibility and identity documents to determine whether the documents reasonably appear to be genuine and record the document information on the form I-9. You must do this, folks, and keep it on hand because it comes up. You'll never see it coming. You'll just go, oh, wait, and then you don't have the information, and then the IRS or somebody is asking you to produce the information, and then you're spending a lot of time that you didn't need. Do it here now. The employee must complete the employer's withholding certificate. That's the W-4. Most of you are familiar with it. You cannot tell them how to fill it out. They can go online and figure it out. But people go, well, what do I put in this box? You can't tell them that. That's for them to figure out. Okay? It's kind of practicing tax law if you do. Some compliance basics. All hourly employees must have and use a time card. Electronic, paper, third-party apps, whatever. They must use the time card. A lot of the software does have scheduling apps in it where they can clock in and clock out, and then you can go in and make adjustments. Though one company, I love the way they're doing it. Big number of employees, but it really works. The employees clock in and clock out, and then there is a time card sheet that says, oh, I forgot to clock in, or I forgot to clock out, or I worked through my break, or something else happened, or I had to leave early because I got sick, and here's my sick, I want my sick time. So they use a paper form, which then they copy and make the adjustments to the schedules, but they must use a time card, and they're going to make mistakes. They're going to forget to clock in, clock out, something's going to happen. You want one that's fairly easy to adjust so that when you do payroll, it's simple, not too hard. Know the overtime pay rules for your business, meaning your industry, okay? It can vary, mostly does not, but some industries have some provisions. For example, emergency workers, hospital staff, and things like that. If they may not be able to take a break. If they've got an emergency, they're completely forgiven if they work through their break, but there are considerations. So you need to know what they are. If you're going to do an alternative work week, okay, these schedules have stringent requirements. An alternative work week is they're going to work four 10-hour days and then take an extra day off, okay? You must have a clear written policy. It really needs to apply to all employees, okay? It is the employer's responsibility to enforce breaks. Lunch breaks should be tracked. They should be clocking in and clocking out. And it's your responsibility to say, have you taken your break? That's where you have the policy and the practice where they come together, where you're going, you make sure that they're consistently saying, oh, you're supposed to take your breaks. A lot of people do not have their employees clock out and clock in for their breaks. That's fine. The thing is that you must have a policy that they take their breaks and you must enforce it. So best practices, hire what you cannot train, know the difference between a 1099 contractor and an employee, know and comply with the rules for each, keep good records, keep your records confidential, locked filing cabinets, folks. It's really funny how people get real curious about what other people are making, and don't leave payroll information laying around on a desk somewhere. People get nosy, and it's just human nature. Get some help, folks. If you don't know how to do this, get help. So some more on payroll best practices. Use payroll software. Gusto, SurePayroll, ADP, QuickBooks. Pay on time every time. Know and comply with all EDD, state, FTB, that's Franchise Tax Board, CalSavers, federal IRS, Social Security requirements. Keep good records, Keep records confidential. Don't do this yourself. Get experienced help or training. Okay, and that's it for the presentation. We have some time for some Q&A. I know it blew through this really fast. The thing is, again, you're going to get the recording is going to be made available. You're going to get a copy of the PDF. The work is for you to do. Are you ready to hire employees? What steps do you need? Does an independent contractor meet your needs? And is it allowed? And I will drop the my free gift is a little book on a little ebook on path to financial freedom for entrepreneurs that I put together for you. So I'm going to drop that back in there. There you go. And we're open for questions. Let's see if there's anything. I don't see anything in the chat just yet. I do see one. AJ Tang. Okay, good question. Let me read it out so everybody can hear it. For a home business, if using a social security number, question 1, is using the P.O. box with a mail address to avoid disclosure of your residence address. Generally, you can use a P.O. box for your mailing address. So yes, however, that you just put that on your invoicing or on your certain forms will allow you to do the P.O. box. When you get set up with your EIN and things like that, I think it does allow for you to do a P.O. box as a mailing address, but you will have to provide to them your home address. Okay, so yes, and if it's for employees, you will need an EIN number. You won't be able to use your social security number. Okay, you'll have to be doing that. Now, for an independent contractor, you can use your social security number, and you can, in most circumstances, use a P.O. box. So it really depends on where you're putting that information, but a lot of them do allow you to do a P.O. box because you do not want your home address out there for everything. I hope that answers the question. Question 2, regarding an LLC. If just a startup home business, when to create an entity due to high cost and in the beta testing and no income yet. So creating a legal entity, and the timing for that is somewhat of a legal question, but I can tell you what the parameters and considerations are. First of all, are you committed to the business? If you're committed to the business, you might just as well file for the LLC. Okay. However, with an LLC, even as a single member, you're going to pay the $800 a year to the Franchise Tax Board, FTB, whether you make money or not. If you're unsure that this business is the right fit for you or that it's going to fly, then you might just keep your Social Security and file a fictitious business name in your county to help protect the name some, and to start operating as a business. And that would have less of a tax impact, and it would have fewer costs associated with tax returns and things like that. So it's a more deeper question that you're asking, but the real question is that if you're just testing this out, then chances are being a sole proprietor is a really good fit because you can always file to become an LLC either in the existing year or in the following year, and you can get the tax benefits. However, you'll have to change your bank account and there's extra work to be involved. And I think that does answer your question. Okay, it looks like there are a couple new messages at the bottom. Let's see what we have here.
There is some question in Q&A.
Okay, in Q&A, all right. Okay, in Q&A, I'm not seeing a Q&A. Q&A, there it is. I found it. Okay. Okay, I've had this question before. It's a fair question. Can I share my concerns about the contractors on Fiverr that are based outside of the US? Are we required to provide 1099s? No, they're outside of the United States. No, you're not required to do that. Okay, but I would be very careful about how much, access to your financial information and systems that I would have. But basically, most of them, if they're out of the country and they're out of the country, now the 1099s and things like that, rules don't apply to them. Okay, good question. All right. In the late 1980s or early 1990s, California allowed an employee to file for a stress-related workers' comp disability. If the employee could show that 50% or more of their stress came from their work, then they could get a stress-related disability leave. Are stress-related leaves still allowed in California? How much of the employee's stress comes from their work? What a great question. I don't really have a solid answer for you on that. What I would do is I would talk to a workers' comp specialist who could answer that for you, because there might be some information available online, and if you wanted to check that out, you would look to see who is answering it. So if it's an accounting firm or an insurance company, the people who have experience with this kind of question and stress-related workers' comp payments, you'd be looking for somebody that knows this information and how relevant it is. Because if you're concerned about this, then why are you concerned? And is your business stress related? And then I would say, then maybe you need to hire people differently. And I would say, look at that. So great question, Catherine. A little more research on your side. Go to a workers' comp specialist and see if this is still active, still happening, and what you can do to make sure that it doesn't happen to your company. Okay. Dolene says, can someone at Pace help us? I'm sure they can. I'm sure they can. You reach out to them and ask them, where you need the help. The thing is that Pace provides support and information and guidance. The reality is you still have to do the work. You have to get the forms. You have to put things in place. I doubt very much, and that can be answered here. The thing is that they're not going to write an HR manual for you, an employee's manual for you. They're big, they're expensive. That's my understanding that Pace does not do the work for you. They can guide you with consulting and support and maybe other resources. It falls on you to do the work. And it's really important that you do, because you're going to learn a lot about having employees and independent contractors, because ultimately you are going to be totally and fully responsible for the results, good and bad. Any other questions? Got two more new messages over here. Okay, thank you. Well, thank you, Charlene. Thank you, AJ. So so that really covers it today. I know it's a lot of information. Don't be intimidated. Go out there and find yourself some good employees, grow your business. Know that this is an ordinary process for business owners, and it has its challenges. Okay. And there are people here to help you.
Okay. I think that's all.
That's
Thank
it.
you for thank you, Lona. Thank you everyone to join us. See you next time.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.